The day Claire Brennan's rusted pickup rolled into the gates of Thornhill Ranch, dust rising like ghosts behind her tires, the old ranchers in Copper Ridge exchanged knowing looks across their coffee cups at Maggie's diner. In a valley where land deeds bore the same surnames for 100 years, where respect was earned through calloused hands and successful calving seasons, this outsider clearly had no idea what kind of hell she was walking into. What these weathered cattlemen couldn't possibly know was that their biggest mistake wasn't doubting her resolve. It would be underestimating what desperation could forge in a woman with nothing left to lose. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Montana sky stretched endless and indifferent above Copper Ridge, its April clouds heavy with the promise of late snow. The Thornhill Ranch sat at the valley's eastern edge, 2,000 acres of rolling grassland that hadn't seen proper cattle in 3 years. The main house, a weathered 2-story structure with peeling white paint, stood like a monument to better times. Behind it, the barn leaned slightly to the left, its roof patched with mismatched shingles. Rusted equipment dotted the property like metal sculptures to failure. Claire cut the engine and sat for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel. In the passenger seat, her daughter Lily pressed her face against the window, eyes wide at the vastness. In the back, her son Marcus was already unbuckling, eager to explore despite the exhaustion that had settled over them like dust after 18 hours of driving. This was it. Everything they owned was in the U-Haul trailer hitched behind them. Everything they'd run from was 2 states away, and everything they hoped to become sat waiting in this abandoned ranch that the bank had practically given away. "Mom," Lily's voice was small, uncertain. "Are you sure about this?" Claire forced a smile she didn't feel. "Too late to turn back now, sweetheart." She wasn't lying. The money from selling their Chicago apartment, the settlement from the divorce, her entire severance package from Hammond Agricultural Systems, it was all tied up in this property now. The lawyer had called it a foreclosure opportunity. The real estate agent had called it a fixer-upper with potential. Claire knew what it really was. A last chance. They climbed out into air so clean it almost hurt to breathe. Marcus ran toward the barn, his 10-year-old energy undimmed by the long drive. Lily, 13 and carrying the weight of teenage awareness, stayed close to her mother, her artist's eye already cataloging the decay around them. "The fence is broken there," she pointed toward the northern pasture line where posts tilted at drunken angles, wire sagging between them. "We'll fix it," Claire said with more confidence than she felt. One thing at a time. The sound of an approaching truck made them turn. A mud-splattered Ford F-250 pulled up alongside their vehicle, and a man in his 60s climbed out. His face was all hard angles and sun damage, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of a sweat-stained Stetson. Everything about him, from his worn Wranglers to his scuffed boots, spoke of a life spent working land. "You must be the new owner," he said, not offering his hand. His tone suggested he'd already formed an opinion, and it wasn't favorable. "Claire Brennan." She extended her hand anyway. After a long moment, he shook it briefly. His palm was rough as tree bark, his grip testing her. "Jack Whitmore. My spread runs along your western border." He gestured vaguely toward the horizon. "Been ranching here 43 years. My daddy before me for 30. Granddaddy homesteaded this valley in 1889. The unspoken message was clear. "You don't belong here." "Nice to meet you," Claire said evenly. "I'm hoping to." "Thornhill let this place go to hell before he died," Jack interrupted, his gaze sweeping the property with something between pity and contempt. "Heart attack, 3 years back. His kids wanted nothing to do with ranching, fought over the estate until the bank foreclosed." "You know anything about cattle?" "I worked in agricultural technology for 12 years, Claire replied. "Supply chain optimization, resource management systems, predictive analytics for large-scale operations." Jack's expression didn't change. "That's a lot of fancy words for no." Lily moved closer to her mother, sensing the hostility. Marcus had stopped his exploration and was watching the exchange from the barn doorway. "I'm a fast learner," Claire said, keeping her voice steady. And I'm not afraid of hard work. Hard work? Jack repeated the words like they tasted bitter. Lady, do you have any idea what you've bought? This land needs at least 80,000 in infrastructure repairs just to be viable. The wells are questionable, the grazing rotation hasn't been managed in years, the soil's compacted from overuse. Thornhill was one of the best cattlemen in the county, and even he couldn't keep this operation afloat in his final years. Then I guess I'll have to do things differently, Claire said. Jack shook his head slowly. Different doesn't matter when you don't know what you're doing. Come first drought, first hard winter, first calving season, you'll be running back to whatever city you came from. He climbed back into his truck. Do us all a favor and sell out quick to someone who knows what they're doing. Before you waste everyone's time. He drove off without another word, leaving Claire standing in the settling dust. What a jerk, Marcus called out, his young voice carrying clearly across the yard. Claire couldn't disagree, but she wouldn't say it. He's probably right to be skeptical, she admitted to Lily. We've got a lot to prove. Inside the house, the reality of their situation became even more apparent. Decades-old wallpaper peeled from the walls. The kitchen appliances looked like museum pieces. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom all needed work, everything from new fixtures to basic cleaning. But the bones were solid. The hardwood floors were real oak beneath the grime. The windows, though ancient, were large and let in stunning light. The stone fireplace in the living room had clearly been the heart of family gatherings. As the afternoon wore into evening, they unloaded only the essentials, too tired to do more. Claire stood at the kitchen sink, running water that came out rust-brown at first, then gradually cleared. Through the window, she could see the vast expanse of land that was now somehow hers. The responsibility of it pressed down like a physical weight. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister in Boston. Not too late to come stay with us. Tech companies are hiring. Claire deleted it without responding. That life was over. Hammond Agricultural Systems had collapsed in a spectacular merger scandal, taking her career and her reputation with it. She'd been clear of wrongdoing eventually, but the industry had already moved on. The divorce had finalized 3 months later. David had kept the house in Evanston, the retirement accounts, everything they'd built together. Her lawyer said she could fight for more, but Claire was too exhausted for more battles. Her grandfather had left her a modest inheritance when he passed, enough to make a down payment on something. Anything. When the Thornhill Ranch listing appeared in her desperate late-night internet searches, something had clicked. Maybe it was the Montana connection. Her grandfather had worked ranches here in his youth, had told her stories about it. Maybe it was the price, impossibly low even for a foreclosure. Or maybe it was just the need to disappear somewhere the past couldn't follow. Lily found her there as darkness settled over the valley. I picked my room, she said. The one with the window that faces the mountains. Good choice, Claire replied. Are we going to be okay here? Lily asked, the question she'd been holding back all day. Claire pulled her daughter close. I don't know, baby. But we're going to try our hardest. The first few days blurred together in a haze of cleaning, unpacking, and basic repairs. Claire worked from dawn until she could barely stand, trying to transform the house into something livable. Marcus explored every inch of the property, returning with treasures, old horseshoes, vintage bottles, a rusted spur. Lily sketched the landscape in her notebook, capturing the haunting beauty that Claire was too busy to fully appreciate. On the 4th morning, Claire drove into Copper Ridge proper for supplies. The town consisted of one main street with maybe 20 businesses, half of them looking barely operational. Maggie's diner anchored the north end. Copper Ridge Feed and Supply sat at the south. In between, a small grocery, a hardware store, a bank, a post office, and a bar called the Stirrup that looked like it hadn't changed since Eisenhower was president. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At the feed store, a younger man in his 30s looked up from behind the counter as she entered. His name tag read Ben Walsh. Help you find something? He asked, his tone neutral but not unfriendly. I need advice more than supplies, Claire admitted. I just bought the Thornhill place. Don't know where to start getting it operational again. Ben's eyebrows rose. You're the one Jack's been going on about at the diner. Nothing good, I'm guessing. Jack doesn't think anyone under 60 knows anything about ranching, Ben said with a slight smile. But between you and me, his operation's been declining for years. He's just too stubborn to modernize. He came around the counter. What's your background? Claire told him, watching his expression carefully. Unlike Jack, Ben seemed to actually listen. That's actually useful knowledge, he said when she finished. Ranching is about data as much as instinct these days. Grass management, rotation timing, market analysis. He grabbed a notepad. Let me give you some names. People you should talk to who aren't ancient and bitter. Over the next hour, Ben outlined the basics: who to call for well inspection, which vets serve the area, how to navigate county permits. He was patient with her questions, never condescending, and by the time she left, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in days: cautious hope. That hope dimmed considerably when she returned home to find Marcus in tears and Lily furious. Someone let the air out of our tires, Lily said, pointing to the pickup. All 4 tires were flat. And they left this. She handed Claire a piece of paper, the handwriting crude but clear. Go back where you came from. Claire felt cold despite the afternoon sun. She looked around the empty property, suddenly aware of how isolated they were. The nearest neighbor was Jack Whitmore, and he'd made his feelings clear. The next closest ranch was 3 miles away. Did you see anyone? She asked. Both kids shook their heads. They'd been inside, unpacking books in the living room. It's probably just kids, Claire said, trying to sound unconcerned. Rural areas can be protective of their own. We're outsiders. But she didn't believe it was kids. The message was too pointed, too adult in its resentment. That night, after the kids were asleep, Claire sat on the front porch steps with a flashlight and her grandfather's old rifle that she'd found in the hall closet, hoping it still worked, praying she'd never need to find out. The darkness was absolute in a way city darkness never was. No streetlights, no neighboring windows, just the vast empty range and the cold stars overhead. She must have dozed off because she jerked awake to the sound of an engine. A truck was coming up the drive, headlights cutting through the darkness. Claire stood, gripping the rifle, her heart hammering. The truck stopped 20 feet away. A woman climbed out, hands visible and empty. Easy there, she called. I'm Rachel Chen. I own the Double C Ranch about 5 miles north. Ben Walsh called me, said you could use some help. Claire lowered the rifle but didn't set it down. It's 2 in the morning. Noticed your lights on when I was heading home from a calving. Figured something was wrong. Rachel came closer, and in the porch light Claire could see she was maybe 40, compact and muscular, her black hair pulled back in a practical braid. Ben mentioned you had some trouble today. Someone flattened my tires and left a friendly note, Claire said. Rachel's jaw tightened. Let me guess. Go home or something equally creative? Close enough. This valley's got some good people and some small-minded ones, Rachel said. The small-minded ones don't like change, don't like outsiders, and really don't like the idea that their way isn't the only way. She gestured toward the house. You got coffee? I'll help you change those tires come morning, but right now you look like you could use someone to talk to who isn't trying to run you off. Something about Rachel's direct manner, the lack of pretense or judgment, made Claire's defenses crack. Coffee I can do. They sat at the kitchen table, and Claire found herself telling the whole story. The job loss, the divorce, the inheritance, the desperate gamble on this property. Rachel listened without interrupting, her weathered face thoughtful. You picked a hard path, Rachel said finally. But not impossible. You've got decent grazing land if it's managed right. Good water access once those wells are serviced. The infrastructure's rough but rebuildable. She paused. The real question is, Can you handle being hated while you figure it out? Is it going to be that bad? Depends on how you play it, Rachel said. Jack Whitmore's the unofficial king of the valley's old guard. He's already decided you're a city slicker playing farmer, and he's probably got half the ranchers at Maggie's nodding along with him. They'll wait for you to fail, and some might help that failure along. The tires, Claire said. Maybe. Or maybe just kids being cruel. Rachel met her eyes. But you need to know what you're up against. This isn't just about learning to ranch. It's about proving you deserve a place here. And how do I do that? By not quitting. By asking for help when you need it. By listening more than you talk. And by understanding that every mistake you make will be magnified, while every success will be minimized. Rachel's smile was wry. Welcome to being a woman rancher in a man's world. Now add being an outsider on top of it. They talked until dawn began to gray the eastern sky. Rachel explained the valley's politics, who to trust and who to avoid, how the water rights worked, what the market looked like for cattle. She offered to help Claire develop a business plan, to introduce her to the county extension agent, to teach her the basics that would keep her from making catastrophic mistakes. Why are you helping me? Claire finally asked. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Because 15 years ago, I was you. Came here from California with a dream and no experience. The old-timers gave me hell. A few good people gave me a chance. She stood, stretching. Time to pay that forward. Besides, we outsiders need to stick together. As the sun rose over Copper Ridge, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber, Claire felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, the doubt, the overwhelming sense of being in over her head. But now there was something else, too. A tiny spark of possibility. She walked Rachel out to where the pickup sat on 4 flat tires. Together they jacked it up and began the work of changing them. Marcus emerged sleepy-eyed from the house, followed by Lily with her camera, documenting the sunrise. Who's that? Marcus asked, watching Rachel work. A neighbor, Claire said. A friend. By the time they finished, Ben Walsh had arrived with an air compressor and news that made Claire's stomach drop. Thought you should know, he said, his expression troubled. Jack Whitmore filed a complaint with the county yesterday. Claims you're violating water use regulations and that your fencing is a hazard to his cattle. I haven't used any water beyond household, Claire protested. And I haven't even started on the fences. Doesn't matter if it's true, Rachel said grimly. What matters is he's trying to bury you in bureaucracy before you even get started. Claire felt the spark of hope from earlier begin to fade. This was bigger than flat tires and mean notes. This was a coordinated effort to drive her out. What do I do? She asked. Rachel and Ben exchanged looks. Then Rachel squared her shoulders. You fight back. Properly. Legally. And you show Jack Whitmore and everyone else in this valley that you're not some dilettante playing cowgirl. She fixed Claire with a hard stare. You ready for that? Because once you commit to this fight, there's no going back. You'll be choosing a side, making enemies, burning bridges. Claire looked at her children, watching with worried faces from the porch. She looked at the house that was starting to feel like home. She looked at the vast expanse of land that held so much possibility and so much threat. Then she looked back at Rachel and nodded. I'm ready. The county inspector arrived on a Thursday morning, clipboard in hand and skepticism written across his face. Gerald Moss had been inspecting ranches in Copper Ridge for 22 years, and Claire could tell within seconds that he'd already decided what he'd find before his boots touched her property. Mrs. Brennan, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. I'm here regarding the complaint filed about water usage violations and hazardous fencing conditions. Claire had spent the previous 3 days preparing for this moment. Rachel had coached her on regulations, helped her document everything, taught her to speak the language of code compliance and water rights. Ben had loaned her his grandfather's survey maps showing the original property boundaries and well locations. Even so, her hands trembled slightly as she handed Moss her documentation. As you'll see, I haven't activated any irrigation systems. Household water usage is well within permitted limits. The wells haven't been tested yet because I only took possession 2 weeks ago. And the fencing complaint is premature since I haven't begun repairs. Moss barely glanced at her papers. I'll need to inspect the property myself, ma'am. Complaints require full investigation. They walked the fence line for over an hour, Moss photographing every sagging post and rusted wire. He tested the wells, checked the outbuildings, examined the water troughs that hadn't been used in 3 years. Claire followed silently, Lily and Marcus trailing behind, sensing the importance of the moment. When they finally returned to the house, Moss reviewed his notes with the air of a judge pronouncing sentence. Fencing is substandard but not currently hazardous since you're not running livestock. Water usage is compliant. Wells need professional testing within 90 days. He looked up, his expression slightly disappointed. No violations at this time. Relief flooded through Claire, but Moss wasn't finished. However, he continued, if you intend to operate as a working ranch, you'll need to bring everything up to code. Fencing, facilities, environmental compliance. We're talking significant investment. Given the property's history and your lack of experience, I'd recommend you consider whether this venture is financially viable. It was Jack Whitmore's argument delivered with bureaucratic polish. Claire kept her voice level. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Moss. I'll have everything compliant within the required time frames. After he left, she sat on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. The inspection had found nothing wrong, but it had accomplished exactly what Jack intended. It had reminded her of how precarious her position was, how many ways this could still fail. Rachel's truck appeared an hour later. She took one look at Claire's face and nodded. That bad, huh? No violations. But he made it clear I'm barely hanging on. That's because you are, Rachel said bluntly. And Jack knows it. He's going to keep applying pressure, keep making your life difficult, hoping you'll crack. She sat down beside Claire. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Over the next week, Claire threw herself into work with desperate intensity. She hired a well service company that confirmed the water systems were solid despite their age. She contracted with a fencing crew for repairs, eating deep into her already thin reserves. She met with the extension agent who provided soil testing kits and grazing management resources. Every decision depleted her savings a little more. But the harder she worked, the more resistance she encountered. The fencing crew canceled 2 days before they were scheduled to start, claiming a more urgent job had come up. When Claire called the only other contractor in the area, she was told they were booked solid for 6 months. The feed store where Ben worked suddenly couldn't get the specific supplies she'd ordered, despite them being standard items. Jack's putting pressure on people, Ben admitted quietly when she confronted him. He's a big customer, has a lot of influence. People don't want to risk losing his business by helping you. That's insane, Claire said. This is my livelihood. My children's home. I know. Ben looked genuinely troubled. Look, I can get you the supplies under the table. My boss doesn't need to know exactly which ranch they're going to. And I know a guy in the next county who might do your fencing work. He doesn't care about valley politics. It was a small victory, but it came at a cost. Claire was learning that every step forward required navigating invisible networks of loyalty and resentment, that being an outsider meant playing by different rules. The first real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Claire had taken the kids to Maggie's diner for dinner, too exhausted to cook after another 14-hour day of manual labor. The place fell silent when they entered, conversations dying mid-sentence as every head turned to watch them. Claire felt Lily press closer to her side, Marcus's hand finding hers. They were about to leave when a voice called out from a corner booth. You're the Thornhill place owner, right? An older woman, perhaps 70, waved them over. She had kind eyes and hands marked by decades of hard use. I'm Dorothy Henderson. Sit down. Anyone who makes Jack Whitmore that angry can't be all bad. The tension in the diner eased slightly. Dorothy's invitation was permission, a signal that Claire wasn't entirely pariah. They slid into the booth, and Dorothy pushed a menu toward them. "Don't mind the stairs," Dorothy said. "Small towns are suspicious of change. But they're not all bad people. Just scared." "Scared of what?" Lily asked. "Of losing what little they have left," Dorothy replied. "Used to be 30 working ranches in this valley. Now there's 12. Young people leave because they can't make a living. Corporate outfits buy up the failures and run them with hired hands who don't care about the land." She fixed Claire with a shrewd look. "They see you as either another failure waiting to happen or the first wave of outsiders who'll change everything." "I just want to make a home for my kids," Claire said. "I believe you. But wanting and doing are different things." Dorothy leaned back. "My late husband Tom ran cattle for 47 years. Taught me everything about ranching, and I'll tell you what he always said. The land doesn't care about your plans or your pride. It just keeps being land. You either learn to work with it or it breaks you." Over dinner, Dorothy shared stories about the valley's history, the families who'd succeeded and those who'd failed, the subtle codes that govern rural life. She didn't offer explicit help, but the information she provided was invaluable, a map to navigating the social landscape. As they were leaving, Dorothy called after them. "Claire, there's a Cattlemen's Association meeting next Tuesday at the community center. You should come. Show your face. Let them see you're serious." The meeting was everything Claire feared. 30 ranchers, 29 of them men, all with decades of experience. She walked in with Rachel beside her, feeling every eye track their movement to the back row. Jack Whitmore sat in front, his posture radiating satisfaction at her discomfort. The meeting covered water rights, market prices, upcoming regulations. Claire listened intently, taking notes, trying to absorb the vocabulary and concerns. When the floor opened for new business, Jack stood. "I'd like to address the Thornhill property situation," he began. "We've got someone with no experience trying to operate a ranch in our valley. That affects all of us: water allocation, property values, the reputation of Copper Ridge beef." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "I propose we establish minimum operational standards for valley ranches," Jack continued. "Proof of experience, financial stability, proper insurance. We can't afford amateurs making mistakes that impact the whole community." It was a direct attack, and everyone knew it. Rachel started to stand, but Claire put a hand on her arm. This was her fight. She stood, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Whitmore's right that inexperience is a concern. That's why I'm here, to learn from people who know this valley. But I'd like to address the financial stability question." She pulled out the folder she'd prepared, passing copies down the rows. "This is my business plan for Thornhill Ranch. As you'll see, I've secured financing, completed infrastructure assessments, and developed a 5-year sustainability model based on current market conditions." The plan had taken her 3 sleepless nights to create, drawing on every skill from her corporate career. It outlined a conservative approach, modest herd sizes, focus on quality over quantity, direct marketing strategies that could command premium prices. Jack barely glanced at it. A plan on paper means nothing. Ranching isn't spreadsheets and projections. "You're right," Claire agreed. "It's also labor, land knowledge, and community relationships. I'm not pretending to have 40 years of experience. But I have capital, commitment, and willingness to learn. That's more than a lot of operations can claim." An older rancher Claire didn't recognize spoke up. "Lady, no offense, but you bought the worst property in the valley at the worst possible time. Beef prices are down, input costs are up, drought forecasts look terrible. Even with a good plan, you're facing long odds." "I understand that," Claire said. "But I'd rather fail trying than never try at all. And I'm not asking for special treatment. Just the same chance everyone else gets." Jack stood again. "The same chance? You want access to our shared resources, our collective knowledge, our marketing networks? Those were built over generations. You think you can just buy your way in? The room had gone very quiet. Claire felt the weight of history pressing down, all the unspoken rules and inherited relationships that define this community. No, she said carefully. I don't think I can buy my way in. I think I have to earn it. But that requires you to let me try. The meeting ended without resolution, but something had shifted. Several ranchers approached her afterward, their questions pointed but not hostile. One offered advice on hay suppliers. Another mentioned a cattle auction worth attending. Small overtures, but they mattered. Jack Whitmore watched from across the room, his expression dark. As Claire and Rachel left, he followed them into the parking lot. You made a mistake tonight, he said without preamble. Showing that plan, acting like you belong here. All you did was paint a bigger target on your back. Is that a threat? Rachel asked sharply. It's a reality, Jack replied. This valley protects its own. And you're not one of us. He looked directly at Claire. Your kind always comes in with big ideas and fancy plans. Then the first hard season hits, and you're gone. Except now you've wasted everyone's time and left the land worse than you found it. What exactly is my kind? Claire asked quietly. Jack's jaw tightened. People who think money and education matter more than blood and sweat. People who see land as investment property instead of legacy. People who'll walk away when it gets too hard. You don't know anything about me, Claire said. I know enough, Jack replied. I know you've never birthed a calf at 3 in the morning in a blizzard. Never lost a season's work to disease or drought. Never had to choose between paying the mortgage or feeding your cattle. His voice carried decades of accumulated bitterness. I know you've never buried a child who died because the nearest hospital was an hour away and the roads were impassable. The last statement hung in the air, raw and unexpected. For a moment, Claire saw past Jack's hostility to the grief beneath it. But then his face closed again, the walls rebuilding. This valley's already lost too much, he said. I'm not gonna stand by and watch more of it destroyed by someone playing cowgirl. He walked away, leaving Claire and Rachel standing in the empty parking lot under cold stars. He lost a daughter, Rachel said quietly. 20 years ago. She got sick, and by the time they got her to the hospital, it was too late. His wife left him 6 months later. Couldn't stand the ranch anymore, couldn't stand him. He's been alone out there ever since. Claire felt a pang of unwanted sympathy. That doesn't give him the right to punish me for something that happened before I was even here. No, Rachel agreed. But it explains why he's so determined to keep outsiders out. In his mind, he's protecting what he's got left. The following weeks settled into a grueling rhythm. Claire worked dawn to dusk, repairing fence with Marcus's eager but clumsy help, clearing brush, servicing equipment. Lily had taken over the household management, cooking meals and managing their increasingly tight budget with unexpected skill. The kids were changing, growing tougher and more self-reliant, but Claire worried about the cost. Lily had withdrawn from her online friends, ashamed to video chat from their shabby house. Marcus had nightmares about being chased off the property. Money was becoming critical. The repairs had cost more than projected, and they still hadn't generated any income. Claire had exactly $9,000 left, enough for maybe 3 months if they were careful. Then Dorothy Henderson called with an opportunity. There's a ranch up near Helena liquidating their herd, she said. Quality breeding stock at auction prices. You could start with 20 head, build from there. I know the seller, he'd give you fair terms. It was exactly what Claire needed to become operational. But it would take nearly all her remaining capital, leaving almost no margin for error. One sick animal, one equipment breakdown, one unexpected expense, and they'd be finished. She sat at the kitchen table that night, calculator and bank statements spread before her, adding and re-adding numbers that refused to improve. Lily found her there past midnight. Are we going to lose the ranch? Her daughter asked. Claire wanted to lie, to offer reassurance. But Lily deserved honesty. I don't know, baby. We're right on the edge. Lily sat down across from her. Then we should buy the cattle. What? You always taught us that playing it safe doesn't get you anywhere, Lily said. That's what you told me when I was afraid to enter the art competition. Remember? You said scared and unprepared are different things. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. This is different. This is our home. Your security. No, Lily said firmly. Not having a home is scarier than trying to save it. If we don't take the chance, we'll lose anyway. At least this way, we're fighting. The simple wisdom of it cut through Claire's paralysis. Her daughter was right. Conservative choices had brought them to the brink. Bold action might push them over the edge, but at least it was a choice, not a slow surrender. She bought the cattle. 20 Angus heifers arrived on a Friday afternoon, trucked up from Helena by a driver who looked skeptical about unloading them at Claire's ramshackle operation. But the animals were healthy and calm, and with Rachel's help, they got them settled into the south pasture. Standing at the fence that evening, watching her small herd graze in the golden light, Claire felt something she hadn't felt since arriving in Copper Ridge. Not hope exactly, but purpose. She was a rancher now. Not playing at it, not preparing for it. Actually doing it. The feeling lasted exactly 4 days. On Tuesday morning, Claire found the gate to the south pasture standing open, her cattle scattered across Jack Whitmore's property. She scrambled to round them up, but not before Jack's foreman called the sheriff, claiming trespassing livestock and property damage. The sheriff was a tired-looking man named Tom Bradley who clearly didn't want to be mediating ranch disputes. He took statements from both sides, examined the gate which showed no signs of forced entry, and delivered his verdict with weary resignation. Gate was either left unsecured or deliberately opened. Without proof of tampering, I can't file charges. But Mrs. Brennan, you're responsible for controlling your stock. Any damages to Mr. Whitmore's property are on you. Jack's foreman presented a bill for $500 in damaged fencing and disturbed pasture. Claire knew it was inflated, punitive. But she also knew fighting it would cost more than paying it. She wrote the check, her hand shaking with suppressed rage. That night, she installed locks on every gate and set up motion sensor cameras that Ben had quietly procured for her. If someone was sabotaging her operation, she'd have proof next time. But the damage was done. The incident spread through the valley like wildfire, each retelling making Claire seem more incompetent. She'd lost cattle her first week. She couldn't secure her gates. She was exactly the kind of amateur Jack had warned about. At Maggie's diner 2 days later, Claire overheard a conversation from the next booth. Told you she couldn't handle it. Already cost Jack money with her sloppy management. Feel bad for those kids. They didn't ask for a mother who doesn't know her ass from her elbow about ranching. Claire left without eating, her appetite gone. The harassment escalated. Someone cut a water line to her trough system. Her mailbox was knocked over twice. Marcus came home from his first day at the local school with a black eye and a note from the principal about fighting. The other boy had called his mother a fraud. Marcus had punched him. Claire held her son that evening while he cried angry tears. I hate it here, he sobbed. I hate them. I want to go back to Chicago. I know, baby, she whispered. I know it's hard. But Chicago was gone. The apartment was sold. David had made it clear they weren't welcome back in his new life. There was nowhere to retreat to, no safety net. They were committed now, for better or worse. Rachel found her the next afternoon, sitting in her truck at the edge of the north pasture, just staring at the land. You look like hell, Rachel said, climbing into the passenger seat uninvited. Feel like it too. Jack's winning, Rachel observed. He's isolated you, damaged your reputation, cost you money and time. Pretty soon you'll be so ground down you'll just give up. I know, Claire said. I'm trying to fight back, but I don't know how. Every time I plug one hole, he opens 2 more. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, there's something you should know about Jack. Something most people have forgotten or chosen to ignore. She told the story. 25 years ago, Jack Whitmore's father had tried to squeeze out a newcomer family, the Robinsons, using similar tactics. But the Robinsons had fought back legally, discovered that some of Jack Sr.'s water claims were fraudulent, that he'd been illegally diverting from a shared creek for years. The resulting lawsuit had cost the Whitmores a third of their land and nearly bankrupted them. Jack had never forgotten or forgiven. Now he was protecting his territory with the zealotry of someone who'd almost lost everything once before. "So it's not really about me," Claire said. "It's about what you represent," Rachel corrected. "Change. Threat. The possibility that his way isn't the only way." She turned to face Claire. "But here's the thing. Jack's not wrong about everything. This is hard country. It does chew up and spit out people who aren't ready for it. The question you need to answer isn't whether Jack's being fair. It's whether you actually have what it takes to make this work." Claire looked out at her land, at the cattle grazing peacefully, at the mountains beyond that held snow even in summer. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I'm terrified I'm going to fail and drag my kids down with me." "That's the first honest thing you've said since you got here," Rachel replied. "Fear means you understand what you're risking. Now the question is, what are you going to do with that fear?" Claire wiped her eyes, surprised to find tears there. "Fight, I guess. Because what else is there?" Rachel smiled. "Now you're starting to sound like a rancher." Summer arrived in Copper Ridge with scorching heat and cloudless skies. The drought forecasts everyone had warned about came true with cruel precision. By mid-July, the valley's grass had turned brittle and brown, water levels in creeks dropped to memory, and ranchers watched the sky with grim faces that expected nothing. Claire's cattle stood in the shade of the cottonwoods along her irrigation ditch, the only green thing for miles. The well system she'd invested in, the one that had nearly bankrupted her, was now the difference between survival and catastrophe. While other ranchers hauled water or sold off stock early, her herd had what they needed. She didn't gloat. Didn't mention it at the feed store or the diner. But people noticed. They always noticed in a small town, especially when an outsider got something right that the locals got wrong. Ben Walsh stopped by one evening with news. "Jack's in trouble," he said without preamble. "His main well's failing. He's going to have to either drill a new one, which he can't afford, or reduce his herd by half." Claire felt no satisfaction, only a tired recognition that suffering was suffering, regardless of who experienced it. "That's awful." "You could help him," Ben said carefully. "Your water rights include the old Thornhill Creek that runs along his western border. You could grant him temporary access until he gets his situation sorted." "After everything he's done?" Claire asked. "The sabotage, the complaints, turning the whole valley against me?" Ben shrugged. "Not saying what you should do. Just saying what you could do." After he left, Claire stood on her porch and watched the sunset paint the drought-stricken valley in shades of copper and rust. Somewhere across those hills, Jack Whitmore was facing a crisis that might end his family's century-long hold on the land. She had the power to help or watch him fall. Lily found her there as darkness settled. "You're thinking about helping Mr. Whitmore," she said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "Because that's who you are," Lily replied simply. "You helped that homeless woman in Chicago even after she stole from your car. You donated to your coworkers' fund even though she'd reported you to HR over nothing. You can't help helping people, even when they don't deserve it." "What if it makes me look weak?" Claire asked. "What if people think I'm trying to buy acceptance?" Lily considered this. "Maybe some will think that. But maybe some will think you're being decent. And maybe what they think doesn't matter as much as what you know about yourself." The next morning, Claire drove to Jack Whitmore's ranch. She'd never been past the gate, had only seen the operation from the road. Up close, it was both impressive and heartbreaking. Generations of work evident in every building and fence, but all of it showing the strain of one man trying to maintain what should take 5. Jack emerged from the barn, his face hardening when he saw her. Come to gawk at my troubles? Come to offer water access, Claire said. Temporary easement through the Thornhill Creek until you can drill a new well or the drought breaks. No charge. Jack stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And because I remember what you said about this valley losing too much already. Claire met his eyes. I don't want to see you lose your ranch, Mr. Whitmore. Even if you want to see me lose mine. For a long moment, Jack said nothing. Then he looked away, his jaw working. I can't pay you. I'm not asking you to. I've been horrible to you. Made your life hell. Tried to run you out. I know, Claire said. But watching your cattle die won't make me feel better about that. It'll just mean more suffering in a place that's already seen too much. Jack walked to the fence line, gripping the weathered wood with scarred hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. My daughter's name was Emma. She was 7. Got pneumonia one February when the roads were iced over. By the time we got her to Helena, it was too late. He paused. I blamed the land for a long time. Blamed myself for keeping my family out here instead of somewhere with hospitals and resources. My wife blamed me too, before she left. Claire stayed silent, sensing he needed to say this more than she needed to respond. I told myself I was protecting this valley from outsiders who didn't understand the cost, Jack continued. But really, I was protecting myself from facing what I'd lost. Easier to be angry at strangers than to admit I failed the one person who mattered most. He turned to face her. Your daughter, she looks about the age Emma was. And I've been trying to drive you away, knowing you're just trying to give your kids a good life. Same as I was. Mr. Whitmore, let me finish, he said. I was wrong. About you, about what this valley needs. You came here with nothing and built something despite every obstacle I put in your way. That takes the kind of strength this land respects, even if I was too stubborn to see it. He extended his hand. Thank you for the water access. And I'm sorry. For all of it. Claire shook his hand, feeling the tremor in his grip that might have been emotion or just age catching up with him. Thank you for saying that. Don't make me regret it by going soft on me, Jack said, but there was no bite in it. You've still got a long way to go before you're a real rancher. I know, Claire replied with a slight smile. But I'm learning. The word of Claire's offer spread through the valley faster than the drought had. Within days, her standing shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Ranchers who'd avoided her at the feed store now nodded in greeting. Dorothy Henderson invited the family to Sunday dinner. The fencing contractor who'd been too busy suddenly found an opening in his schedule. But the real change came at the next Cattlemen's Association meeting. Claire entered to find a seat saved for her in the third row, a small but significant move away from the back. When Jack Whitmore stood to address water management strategies for the drought, he acknowledged her contribution without fanfare, treating her as simply another rancher facing the same challenges as everyone else. After the meeting, several of the older ranchers approached her with questions about her well system, her irrigation setup, her approach to water conservation. Not hostile questions, but genuine curiosity. She'd done something they hadn't, and they wanted to understand it. Your granddad would be proud, Dorothy said as they walked out together. He always said the best ranchers weren't the ones who fought the land, but the ones who listened to it. Sounds like you learned that lesson. Did you know my grandfather? Claire asked, surprised. Dorothy smiled. Tom Henderson and Nathan Brennan worked together one summer, 60 years back. Your granddad talked about returning someday, settling here. Never did, but I guess his blood found its way back anyway. That night, Claire pulled out the old photo album her grandfather had left her. She'd looked through it dozens of times, but now she saw it differently. Young Nathan Brennan standing in front of mountains she now recognized. Working cattle in valleys she now called home. The connection wasn't just sentimental, it was real, written in soil and water and the particular slant of Montana sunlight. August brought the Harvest Festival, the valley's biggest annual gathering. Claire had avoided it the previous month, knowing she wasn't ready for that level of community exposure. But now Rachel insisted they attend, and Claire found herself helping Lily and Marcus prepare their entries for the youth competitions. Marcus had chosen to enter a handmade rope halter, the kind used for leading cattle. He'd learned the technique from Jack Whitmore during one of the older ranchers' visits to check on the water situation. The visits had become regular, Jack often arriving with some excuse about monitoring the creek access but staying to teach Marcus skills his own son had never lived long enough to learn. Lily had entered a photo essay titled Becoming, a series of images documenting their first 6 months at the ranch. Claire had seen the photos individually but never together. Arranged in sequence, they told a story of transformation, the house going from derelict to alive, the fields from barren to productive, and most strikingly, their own faces changing from anxious and uncertain to weathered and determined. The festival grounds were crowded with families Claire now recognized, conversations she could finally join without feeling completely lost. The kids ran off to find new friends, ranch children who'd accepted them once it became clear the Brennans were staying. She was examining quilts in the craft tent when she felt someone watching her. A woman in her 40s, well-dressed in that casual expensive way that marked city wealth, was studying her with open curiosity. "You're Claire Brennan," the woman said, approaching. "I'm Jennifer Thornhill. My father used to own your ranch." Claire felt a jolt of recognition. This was one of the children who'd let the property fall into foreclosure rather than maintain it. "Nice to meet you." "I was surprised to hear someone actually bought that place," Jennifer continued. "Even more surprised to hear they're making it work. My father loved that land, but toward the end he couldn't keep up with it. My brother and we didn't want any part of ranching. Too hard, too isolating, too much sacrifice for too little return." "It's definitely all of those things," Claire agreed carefully. Jennifer looked out toward the mountains visible beyond the festival tents. "I grew up there, you know. Learned to ride in those pastures. Had my first kiss in that barn." Her expression was complicated, wistful and relieved at once. "But I don't regret leaving. This life wasn't for me, and I'm glad I was honest about that. Some people aren't meant for ranching." "And some people are," Claire said. "Apparently you are," Jennifer replied. "That takes a special kind of stubbornness. Or maybe courage. I'm not sure there's a difference." She smiled. "Anyway, I'm glad someone's taking care of the place. It deserved better than what we gave it at the end." After Jennifer walked away, Claire felt an unexpected gratitude. She'd spent months being angry at the Thornhill children for letting such valuable land deteriorate. But Jennifer was right, some people weren't meant for this life, and forcing it would have been worse than walking away. The thought led to another. David's final words during their divorce had been, "You're never satisfied, always chasing the next thing." At the time, she'd been hurt. Now she understood he'd been right, just not in the way he meant. She wasn't satisfied with easy comfort or conventional success. She needed something harder to prove herself against, needed to build instead of maintain. The announcement of competition winners drew everyone to the main stage. When Marcus's name was called for second place in the youth crafts category, his whoop of joy carried across the festival grounds. Jack Whitmore was there to shake his hand, and Claire saw something in the old rancher's face that looked almost like peace. Lily's photo essay won first place in youth photography. When she accepted the ribbon, she spoke into the microphone with a confidence Claire barely recognized. "These photos are about how places change people and how people change places. 6 months ago, we didn't belong here. Now we can't imagine being anywhere else." The applause that followed felt genuine, welcoming. Claire blinked back tears as her daughter returned, holding her ribbon like a trophy. That evening, as the festival wound down and families began drifting toward their vehicles, Dorothy Henderson found Claire at the edge of the grounds. "Got something to show you," she said, leading Claire toward the community center's back room. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs spanning a century. Valley history preserved in black and white, then color, then digital. Dorothy pointed to a photo from 1963, a group of young men standing beside a fence line. "That's your grandfather," she said, indicating a lean figure on the left. "And that's Jack's father beside him. They worked together that summer, helped old man Peterson build his irrigation system. The one you're using now." Claire stared at the image. Her grandfather's face was young and unlined, but his eyes held the same determined look she saw in her own mirror these days. "I didn't know. Most history around here goes unspoken," Dorothy said. "But it matters. Your grandfather put his sweat into this land. That makes you less of an outsider than you think." The revelation shifted something in Claire's understanding of her place here. She hadn't just bought property, she'd completed a circle her grandfather had started decades ago. As September arrived and the drought finally broke with torrential rains, Claire stood in her muddy pasture watching her cattle graze on grass that was already starting to recover. The ranch wasn't profitable yet, probably wouldn't be for another year at least. But it was operational, sustainable, and most importantly, it was home. Lily joined her, camera in hand, always documenting. "Do you think we'll stay here forever?" she asked. "I don't know about forever," Claire replied. "But for now, for as long as it makes sense." "It makes sense to me," Lily said. "I know it's been hard, and scary sometimes. But I like who we're becoming here. We're tougher. More real." Marcus ran up then, covered in mud from helping Jack Whitmore repair fencing damaged by the rains. "Jack says I'm a natural with fence posts," he announced proudly. "Says I've got good instincts." Watching her children, Claire realized the gamble had paid off in ways she couldn't have predicted. Not financially, not yet. But in terms of who her kids were becoming, the confidence and capability they were developing, the connection to something larger than themselves. Rachel's truck appeared, as it often did around dinner time. She'd become more than a mentor, closer to family. "Heard your first calf is coming early," she called. "Thought you might want experienced hands nearby." They gathered in the barn as evening fell, 3 generations of ranching knowledge between Rachel, Jack who'd also shown up without being asked, and Claire who was still learning. The heifer labored through the night, and when dawn broke, Claire held a wet, gangly calf that bawled its first protest at the cold air. "Congratulations," Jack said quietly. "You're officially a cattle rancher." Claire looked at the new life in her arms, at her children watching with wonder, at the land beyond the barn doors that had tested and changed and ultimately accepted them. "Thank you," she said, and meant it for more than just the moment. The weeks that followed brought the rhythm of harvest season, cutting hay, preparing for winter, making decisions about which heifers to keep and which to sell. Claire made mistakes, plenty of them, but each one taught her something the books and experts couldn't. By the time October painted the valley in gold and crimson, Thornhill Ranch had its first income, modest sales to a specialty market that valued sustainably raised beef. Not enough to solve all their problems, but enough to prove the model could work. The final validation came unexpectedly. Claire received a letter from the Copper Ridge Cattlemen's Association, informing her that she'd been nominated for membership, a recognition that required unanimous approval from existing members. Jack Whitmore's signature appeared first on the list of sponsors. She stood in her kitchen, reading the letter 3 times, feeling the weight of acceptance after months of resistance. Lily and Marcus were at school, the house quiet except for the wind against the windows and the distant lowing of cattle. Claire walked outside, crossing the yard to stand at the fence line overlooking the valley. The land stretched away in every direction, marked now by fences she'd repaired, cattle she'd raised, water systems she'd installed. Every acre held memory now, good days and terrible ones, small victories and crushing setbacks. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Boston. "Still surviving out there in the wilderness?" Claire smiled and typed back. "Not surviving. Living." Because that was the difference she'd finally learned. Surviving was what you did when you had no choice. Living was what you did when you'd chosen your hard thing and committed to it completely, accepting the cost because the alternative, safety without purpose, was a slower kind of death. The ranch would never be easy. Next year would bring new challenges, different struggles. But standing there in the autumn light, watching her cattle graze on land her grandfather had once worked, Knowing her children were growing into people who understood the value of real things, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but something deeper. Belonging. The bone-deep certainty that this place, difficult and demanding as it was, had become inseparable from who they were. A truck appeared on the road, Jack Whitmore coming to check on something or teach Marcus another skill or just to sit on the porch in comfortable silence. Behind him would come others, Rachel and Ben and Dorothy, the community that had tested her and found her adequate. Not exceptional, not heroic, just adequate. And in a place like Copper Ridge, for an outsider who'd earned her place through pure stubborn refusal to quit, adequate was the highest compliment the land could give. Claire turned back toward the house, toward the life they were building one difficult day at a time. The mountains stood eternal beyond, keeping their secrets and their judgment. The soil remembered everything, every failure and triumph written in its layers. And somewhere in that soil, in the water that flowed through ancient wells, in the grass that bent beneath Montana wind, was the answer to the question she'd carried here. Not whether she could make it work, but whether she was willing to become the person who could. The land had given its verdict. She had proven herself worthy, not through perfection, but through persistence. The outsider had become a part of Copper Ridge's story, another name in the long history of those who chose hard ground over easy comfort. As the sun set over Thornhill Ranch, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow, Claire felt the weight of legacy settling on her shoulders. Not a burden, but a responsibility she'd earned the right to carry. The land would remember her now, long after she was gone. And her children would remember what she'd taught them here, about resilience and community and the quiet dignity of building something that mattered. That was enough. That was everything. Winter came to Copper Ridge with the kind of silence that only deep snow can bring. By December, the valley transformed into something ancient and pure, the harsh edges of summer softened beneath layers of white that erased property lines and old grudges alike. Claire stood at her kitchen window, watching the first real blizzard of the season paint the world into stillness, and felt the particular peace that comes after surviving your first full cycle of seasons in a place that doesn't forgive carelessness. The ranch had made it through fall with modest profit, enough to cover winter feed and keep the bills current with a small cushion for emergencies. Not wealth by any measure, but sustainability, which in ranching terms was its own kind of victory. The cattle were healthy, the equipment winterized, the hay stored properly in the barn that no longer leaned quite so dramatically to the left. Marcus burst through the door in a shower of snow, 11 years old now and taller than he'd been 6 months ago. Jack says the storm's going to last 3 days. He's coming over to help us check the herd before it gets worse. I'll get the coffee started, Claire replied, smiling at how naturally her son spoke of storm preparations and herd management, as if he'd been born to it rather than learned it through necessity. Lily descended the stairs with her camera, always documenting. At 14, she'd developed an artist's eye for the stark beauty of winter, and her photographs had started attracting attention beyond the valley. A gallery in Billings wanted to feature her Seasons of Becoming series, images that chronicled not just their ranch but the entire valley's transformation through the year. The light's perfect right now, Lily said, pulling on her coat. I want to get the barn with the snow coming down behind it. Stay close to the house, Claire cautioned, but without the edge of fear that would have laced her voice a year ago. Her children had learned the land's dangers and how to respect them. They were ranch kids now, in the way that mattered most, not by birth but by earned knowledge. Jack's truck appeared through the swirling snow, and beside him in the cab sat someone Claire hadn't expected. Jennifer Thornhill, the woman she'd met at the Harvest Festival, climbed out bundled against the cold. Surprise visit, Jennifer said with a self-deprecating smile. I was passing through on business and got caught by the storm. Jack saw me stranded at Maggie's and insisted I come out here. She glanced around at the ranch with an expression that held layers of emotion. Wanted to see the place one more time anyway. See what you've done with it. They worked together through the morning, checking that the cattle had shelter and access to unfrozen water, breaking ice where it had formed, ensuring feed was distributed properly. Jennifer moved with the muscle memory of someone who'd done this work before, even if she'd chosen to leave it behind. My father used to love storms like this, Jennifer said as they stood in the barn afterward, warming their hands around coffee mugs. Said it was when you could really see what a ranch was made of. Good preparation showed, bad preparation killed. He built this place to last, Claire replied. The bones were solid even when everything else was falling apart. Jennifer nodded slowly. I used to feel guilty about letting it go. Like I'd failed some sacred trust. She looked at Claire directly. But watching you work this morning, seeing what you've built here, I realized my failure was staying too long. Trying to be something I wasn't. The land deserves people who want it, not people who feel obligated to it. The honesty in her words created a bridge between them, two women who'd made different choices about the same piece of earth. You gave me a chance to become who I needed to be, Claire said. That's not failure. That's passing something on to someone who could carry it. By afternoon, the storm had intensified to the point where travel was impossible. Jennifer called her hotel to cancel, and they settled into the kind of enforced domesticity that winter storms create. Marcus taught her the card game Jack had taught him. Lily showed her the photo series, and Jennifer's eyes grew bright with unshed tears as she saw her childhood home transformed through her daughter's lens. That's the cottonwood where I broke my arm falling from the third branch, she said, pointing to one image. In that corner of the barn, my father proposed to my mother right there. She looked up at Lily. You've captured something I couldn't see when I lived here. The hope in this place. I only saw the hardship. Jack arrived for dinner, stomping snow from his boots and filling the kitchen with his gruff presence. Over a meal of beef stew and fresh bread, the conversation turned to valley history, and Jack found himself telling stories Claire had never heard. About the winter of '78 when the snow drifted so high they couldn't reach the cattle for a week. About the drought in '88 that broke half the ranchers in the county. About Jennifer's father Tom Thornhill winning the county fair's grand champion bull 3 years running. Your dad was stubborn as they come, Jack said to Jennifer. We fought about everything, water rights, grazing associations, whose truck was better. But he was a good man. Honest. When Emma died and my wife left, Tom was the one who came by every evening for a month, just to sit and make sure I was eating. Jennifer's expression showed she'd never known this. He never told me that. Wouldn't have, Jack replied. That generation didn't talk about feelings much. But he cared about this valley, about the people in it. Hated seeing anyone struggle alone. He glanced at Claire. Would have liked you, I think. Would have respected what you're trying to do here. The statement carried weight, coming from Jack. It was as close to full acceptance as Claire was likely to get, and it was enough. As night fell and the storm continued its assault on the valley, they gathered in the living room around the fireplace that Claire had restored to working order. The old house creaked and settled around them, its bones remembering other storms, other generations who'd sheltered within its walls. I want to tell you something, Jennifer said suddenly, looking at Claire. About why this place fell apart at the end. It wasn't just my father's age or his arthritis. She took a breath. He made some bad investments trying to modernize, borrowed heavily against the land. When beef prices crashed, he couldn't recover. The bank was going to foreclose anyway. My brother and I letting it go to auction, that was just accepting what was already lost. The confession hung in the warm air. Claire understood she was being trusted with a family shame, the kind that small towns never fully forget. He died thinking he'd failed, Jennifer continued quietly. That he'd let down everyone who came before him. I never got to tell him that wasn't true, that sometimes loving something means knowing when to let it go. Jack shifted in his chair. Tom wasn't the only one who made bad bets trying to keep up with changing times. Half the valley's underwater in debt from chasing efficiency that never materialized. He looked at Claire. That's part of why your approach scared people. You came in doing things differently, and if it worked, it meant we'd been wrong. Easier to tear you down than face that. But you didn't, Claire said. You could have kept fighting me, but you didn't. Got tired, Jack admitted. Tired of being angry all the time. Tired of blaming outsiders for problems that started inside. And watching you refuse to quit despite everything, reminded me of why I loved this life in the first place. Not because it was easy, but because it wasn't. The conversation drifted into comfortable silence, broken only by the fire's crackle and the wind's howl beyond the walls. Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch, and Lily sketched in her notebook, capturing the scene with an artist's eye for meaningful detail. The storm broke on the third day, revealing a valley transformed. Snow lay thick and pristine across the land, smoothing over the rough patches and old scars. Claire walked out into a world that felt newborn, the air so cold and clear it hurt to breathe. Her cattle stood in the south pasture, dark shapes against white emptiness, healthy and calm. She'd kept them alive through her first real winter storm. It seemed like a small thing unless you understood what it represented: preparation, knowledge, the kind of vigilance that separated successful ranchers from cautionary tales. Jack joined her at the fence, two ranchers studying their stock in the aftermath of weather that had tested and found their work adequate. "Spring calving's going to be interesting," he observed. "Got any plans for expanding your herd?" Slowly, Claire replied. "No rush. Build the foundation solid before adding weight to it." Jack nodded approval. "Smart. Your grandfather would have said the same thing." He paused. "Been meaning to talk to you about something. Rachel and I and a few others, we're thinking about forming a cooperative. Small ranchers pooling resources for marketing, bulk feed purchases, shared equipment. Interested?" The offer was more than business, it was full inclusion in the valley's economic and social structure. "Very interested," Claire said. "Good," Jack replied. "Because you're also going to teach the others your water management system. No point in everyone struggling separately when someone's figured out a better way." By February, the cooperative had taken shape with 7 member ranches and a shared vision of sustainable small-scale ranching that could compete with corporate operations through quality and direct marketing. Claire found herself in the unexpected role of technical advisor, her corporate background finally valuable in this new context. Dorothy Henderson hosted the planning meetings at her ranch, which had become neutral ground where old tensions could be set aside. Over coffee and strategy sessions, Claire watched the valley's social fabric rewire itself, grudges giving way to pragmatism, suspicion transforming into cautious collaboration. "You've changed us," Dorothy said to Claire one evening after a particularly productive meeting. "Not just economically. You've reminded us that this valley belongs to anyone willing to fight for it, not just those born into it." "I didn't do that alone," Claire replied. "Rachel, Ben, you, even Jack in his own way, you all chose to let me in." "Because you proved yourself worth letting in," Dorothy corrected. "That's how it works here. Nothing's given, everything's earned. You earned it." March brought the first signs of spring and the anxiety of calving season. Claire's small herd produced 12 healthy calves with only one difficult birth that required the vet's intervention. She stayed up 3 nights straight monitoring the process, and by the time the last calf stood on wobbly legs to nurse, she felt hollowed out by exhaustion and filled with quiet pride. Marcus had been with her for every birth, learning to recognize signs of distress, to assist when needed, to give space when the cow had things under control. At 11, he spoke casually of breech presentations and retained placentas, veterinary vocabulary rolling naturally from a kid who'd once only known city streets. "I think I want to be a vet," he announced one morning over breakfast. "A ranch vet, like Dr. Sullivan. So I can help people with their cattle." Claire felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I think that's a wonderful goal, buddy." "Jack says I've got the right temperament for it," Marcus continued. "Says you need patience and steady hands and the ability to stay calm when everything's going wrong. He's been teaching me about animal behavior, how to read what they're telling you." Lily looked up from her eggs. "And what has Jack been teaching you?" Claire asked her daughter. "Nothing directly," Lily admitted. "But I've been photographing him working. The way his hands move when he's fixing fence, the concentration on his face when he's assessing cattle. I want to do a series called The Last of a Generation. Document the old-time ranchers before they're gone." It was typical of Lily to see the broader story, to understand that what they were living through was a moment of transition in the valley's history. The old guard aging out, new approaches taking root, the land itself adapting to climate shifts that made traditional methods increasingly risky. By the time April arrived with its mud and renewal, Thornhill Ranch had completed its first full year of operation. The financial reports showed modest profit, enough to start paying down debt and make strategic investments. More importantly, the ranch had proven its model: efficient water use, rotational grazing, direct marketing to premium buyers who valued sustainability. 3 neighboring ranches had adopted elements of Claire's approach. 2 more had joined the cooperative. The valley was changing, not abandoning its heritage but adapting it, and Claire had somehow become part of that evolution rather than a threat to it. The second Harvest Festival arrived with Claire in a completely different position than the first. Now she was on planning committees, judging youth competitions, hosting a workshop on water conservation strategies. The transformation was complete and yet felt natural, as if she'd always been part of this community. Jack found her setting up the Thornhill Ranch display, which featured Lily's photographs and Marcus's rope work alongside information about their sustainable practices. "Got something for you," he said gruffly, handing her an envelope. Inside was a land deed. Claire looked up confused. "What is this?" 20 acres on my northern border, Jack explained. "Been meaning to sell it for years but never found the right buyer. Figured you might want to expand eventually. It's good grazing land, and it'll give you access to the upper creek." He cleared his throat. "Tom Thornhill and I bought that parcel together back in '82, planned to share the water. After he passed and the place went to auction, I couldn't stand to use it. Felt like I was profiting from his family's loss." "Jack, I can't." "Market rate," he interrupted. "Payment plan if you need it. This isn't charity. It's business and maybe settling an old debt I owed to a friend." Claire accepted the deed with shaking hands, understanding it was more than land. It was Jack's way of saying she belonged not just to the valley's present but to its future, that her ranch would endure beyond her own lifetime. As the festival wound down that evening, Claire stood with her children watching the sun set over land that now felt less like property and more like partnership. The ranch would never be easy. Next year would bring new challenges: shifting markets, aging equipment, the endless cycle of growth and loss that defined agricultural life. But she'd learned something crucial in these 20 months. Success in ranching wasn't measured in wealth or comfort. It was measured in persistence, in adapting without breaking, in building something that could weather storms both meteorological and human. "Mom," Marcus said quietly. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Claire pulled both her children close. "Forever's a long time. But for as long as this land wants us, we'll be here." Lily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I think it wants us. I can feel it sometimes, when I'm taking pictures. Like the land's telling its own story through us." It was a poetic way to describe what Claire had also come to feel, that sense of being part of something larger than individual ambition or survival. They weren't just using this land. They were joining its long history, adding their chapter to a story that had begun generations before and would continue long after. As darkness settled over Copper Ridge and the first stars appeared in that vast Montana sky, Claire thought about her grandfather, about Tom Thornhill, about all the people who'd worked the soil and left their mark. She thought about Jack's daughter Emma, who'd never grown up to see what her father had built. She thought about Jennifer, who'd had the courage to walk away when staying would have destroyed her. They'd all been right in their own ways. The land needed some people and released others. It demanded everything and gave back just enough to keep you fighting. It remembered both kindness and cruelty, success and failure, writing it all into layers of soil that held the valley's complete history. And now, impossibly, Claire Brennan and her children were part of that history. Not outsiders anymore. Not really insiders either, perhaps, but something new. Bridge builders between what had been and what might come next. Proof that the valley's story wasn't finished, that new chapters could be written by those brave or foolish enough to try. The land had tested them and found them worthy. Not through grand gestures or dramatic victories, but through the quiet accumulation of small choices made right. Through showing up every morning regardless of difficulty. Through learning from mistakes without being destroyed by them. Through understanding that belonging wasn't granted or inherited, it was earned one difficult day at a time. As they walked back toward the house, lights glowing warm against the encroaching night, Claire felt the weight of legacy settling comfortably on her shoulders. This was home now. These mountains, this valley, this community of stubborn souls who'd finally accepted 3 more into their fold. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges. But tonight, there was peace in knowing they'd found their place in the world, a place that demanded everything and gave back something more valuable than comfort. Purpose. Connection. The bone-deep satisfaction of building something that mattered. The land would remember them now. And that was enough. That was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.